Marcus Hale had learned to notice everything, every handshake that lasted a second too long, every smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, every slight shift in a boardroom that signaled betrayal. But he almost missed the most important moment of his life, the silent, barely perceptible motion of a waitress switching his glass of water with another as she passed his table at the Silvercrest Gala, a glittering charity event filled with the city's wealthiest elite, held in a grand ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers and the hum of carefully curated conversation. Marcus sat alone at table 7, his silver-streaked hair perfectly combed, his custom Italian suit a statement of power and isolation, checking his phone with the detached air of a man who had everything except a reason to feel alive. He had built Hale Industries from nothing, turned it into a global empire, but somewhere along the way, he had lost his wife to cancer, distanced himself from his 2 adult children, who barely spoke to him, and wrapped himself in the cold armor of wealth and control. He glanced up just in time to see her, a black woman in her late 40s, wearing the simple black and white uniform of the service staff, her name tag reading Grace, and their eyes met for the briefest of moments, and in that flash, he saw something that startled him: fear, determination, and a plea for him to stay silent. She moved on without a word, carrying his original glass away on her tray, disappearing into the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, and Marcus sat frozen, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years, because he understood, in some primal, instinctual way, that something terrible had just been avoided. He stared down at the new glass of water in front of him, clear and innocent, and his mind raced. Why would she switch it? What did she see? Who had touched the first glass? And a cold dread settled into his chest. He scanned the room, noting the business rivals seated nearby, the investors who smiled at him with too much interest, the employees who had been quietly let go during the last restructuring, and he realized how many people in this room might wish him harm. And yet, it was this woman, this stranger, whose name he had only seen for a second, who had stood between him and catastrophe. Marcus rose from his seat, his legs unsteady, and followed the direction Grace had gone, weaving through tables toward the service corridor, ignoring the curious glances and polite greetings, driven by a need to know, to understand, to thank her, or perhaps to confirm he wasn't losing his mind. He found her in the staff preparation area, a stark, fluorescent-lit room behind the glamour, where she stood alone, staring at the glass she had taken from his table, now sitting on a metal counter, her hands trembling. "Why did you do that?" Marcus asked quietly, and Grace startled, spinning around, her eyes wide with alarm, but also resignation, as if she had known he would come. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry, I overstepped. She began, but he raised a hand gently. "Please," he said, his voice softer than he'd spoken in months, maybe years. "I'm not angry. I need to know why." Grace hesitated, her shoulders sagging, and then she spoke, her voice low and steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "I saw a man, one of the catering supervisors, lean over your table when you weren't looking. He dropped something into your glass, something from a small vial. I've worked hospitality for 26 years, Mr. Hale, and I know what normal looks like, and that wasn't it." His face, he looked guilty, angry. "I didn't have time to find security, and I didn't know if anyone would believe me, so I switched it. I took the risk, because I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing and something happened to you." Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him, the weight of her words crashing down. Someone had tried to poison him, to end his life in a room full of people, and this woman, who owed him nothing, who he had never met, had saved him without hesitation, without seeking reward or recognition. "Did you see who it was?" he asked, his voice hoarse, and Grace nodded slowly. "I saw his face, but I don't know his name. He's gone now, left right after I took the glass. But Mr. Hale, you need to call the police. You need to." Marcus shook his head, raising a hand. "I will. I promise. But first, I need to know why. Why would you risk your job, maybe even your safety, for a stranger? Grace looked at him for a long moment, and he saw layers in her gaze: weariness, strength, a lifetime of hard-won wisdom. Because I have a son, she said quietly. He's 17, and I've spent his whole life teaching him that you do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching, even when the person you're helping wouldn't do the same for you. If I had walked past your table and done nothing, I couldn't look him in the eye and tell him to be a good man. It's that simple. Her words struck Marcus like a physical blow, cutting through decades of cynicism and self-protection. And he felt something crack open inside him, a rush of shame and gratitude, and something he hadn't felt in so long, he almost didn't recognize it: humility. Over the following weeks, as the police investigated, eventually identifying the catering supervisor as a man named Derek Voss, whose brother had lost his pension when Marcus's company acquired and restructured his previous employer, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Grace. He learned that she worked 3 jobs to support her son, Caleb, a bright young man who had earned a scholarship to study engineering but still needed help with living expenses and books. Grace had been widowed 8 years earlier when her husband, a construction worker, died in an accident, and since then, she had built a life out of sheer determination, sacrifice, and love. Marcus arranged to meet her again, this time not in a kitchen corridor but at a quiet coffee shop, and when she arrived, still in her work uniform from her morning shift at a hotel, he saw the exhaustion etched into her face, but also the unbreakable dignity. "I want to help you," Marcus said, and Grace shook her head immediately. "Mr. Hale, I didn't do what I did for a reward. I don't want your money." Marcus smiled, a genuine smile, rare and transformative. "I know you don't, Grace. That's exactly why I want to help. You gave me something I can never repay. You gave me my life, yes, but more than that, you reminded me what kind of person I used to want to be, before I got lost in deals and numbers and competition. Please, let me do this. Let me pay for Caleb's education, all of it, and let me offer you a position at my company not as a favor, but because I need people like you. People who see what's right and act on it." Grace's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, and Marcus reached across the table, not touching her, but close enough to bridge the distance. "Say yes," he said gently. "Let me be part of your story, the way you became part of mine." Over the months that followed, Grace joined Hale Industries as a consultant for staff development and corporate culture, bringing her decades of insight from the service industry, her ability to read people, and her unshakable moral compass. And the changes she inspired rippled through the company: better labor practices, employee support programs, a shift in values from pure profit to purpose. Marcus, meanwhile, began the harder work of rebuilding the bridges he had burned, reaching out to his daughter Emma and his son Thomas, admitting his failures as a father, asking not for forgiveness, but for a chance to try again. And though the conversations were awkward and sometimes painful, they were real, and that was a start. On the 1-year anniversary of the gala, Marcus hosted a small, private dinner, not a glittering event, but an intimate gathering in his penthouse, overlooking the city, with Grace and Caleb, Emma and Thomas, and a few others whose lives had intersected with his transformation. As they sat around the table, Marcus stood, his glass of water raised. He noticed Grace's slight smile at that hand. He spoke from a place deeper than words usually reached him. "A year ago, someone tried to take my life," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "and someone else chose to save it. Not because she knew me, not because she liked me, but because she believed in doing what was right. Grace, you didn't just save my life that night, you gave it back to me. Gave me a reason to be better, to live with purpose, instead of just existing with wealth. You taught me that the most powerful thing we can do is see each other, really see each other, across all the divides we create, and act with kindness, even when it costs us something. I don't know what I did to deserve your compassion, but I'm spending the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." Grace's eyes shimmered, and Caleb squeezed his mother's hand, pride radiating from him, and Emma wiped her eyes, seeing her father truly, seeing him maybe for the first time in a decade. And Thomas nodded, his own walls beginning to crack. The evening unfolded with laughter and stories, with the easy warmth of people who had chosen to let each other in, and as Marcus looked around the table, he understood that this connection, this authenticity, this love was the empire that actually mattered, the legacy that would outlast any fortune. Later, as Grace prepared to leave, Marcus walked her to the elevator, and she turned to him with a soft, knowing expression. "You know, Mr. Hale Marcus, I think we saved each other that night," she said. "You needed someone to see the danger, and I needed someone to remind me that the things I teach my son, the values I hold on to even when I'm exhausted and struggling, they matter, they make a difference, even in ways I'll never know." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you, Grace, for everything." She smiled, stepping into the elevator. "Thank you for paying attention," she said. "Most people don't." As the doors closed and Marcus stood alone in the hallway of his once lonely penthouse, now filled with the echoes of family and friendship, he thought about all the moments in life we almost miss, all the quiet heroes who move through the world, doing what's right without fanfare, all the chances we have to be better if we just open our eyes and see. He had been a man who noticed everything in business, but had been blind to what mattered most, and it took a stranger's courage, a waitress's silent act of grace, to wake him up, to show him that true wealth isn't measured in what you have, but in who you become and how you treat the people no one else is watching. In the end, the black waitress who switched his glass in silence didn't just save his life, she transformed it, proving that sometimes the most profound moments come not with grand gestures or dramatic announcements, but in the quiet choice of one person to care for another, to risk something for nothing, to believe that every life has value and that kindness, even in the face of indifference or danger, is never wasted. And that simple truth, that revolutionary, beautiful truth changed everything.